everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
We have an expression inside SMART, which is inspiring greatness. And that is, unlocking the potential within every learner once they understand a concept. And so what we want to do is we want to bring using technology, we want to bring those moments where the teacher and the student can have that moment where the student unlocks some knowledge or understands some concept, right? Because we believe that ultimately inspires them to do great things. Having said all that stuff, if you look at, how do you motivate an individual learner, right? Are they engaged in the content? Is the content where they are? Are you meeting them, are you challenging them on the quizzes or tests or assignments? Are you tailoring the work to where the student is weakest and not just emphasizing where they're the strongest? All of those things that are kind of personalizing and privatizing the delivery of the lesson and the experience to the student are things that we're absolutely passionate about, pursuing in a safe way, because ultimately I think that's where education will be going. It's going to be much more tailored to the individual and the individual learning style than what we're seeing today.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Nicholas Svensson, CEO of Smart Technologies. Welcome to the show today.
How are you today, Scott? Glad to be here.
So what is Smart?
What is Smart? We're the world-leading education technology company. When I say education technology, we focus on interactive technologies in the classroom, most notably the smartboard. So many of you with children would have smartboards in their classrooms. So we are a company that has enjoyed very, very deep penetration around the world with our product.
So I'm probably dating myself, but I'm used to those projectors. If you remember, they would have these clear plastic, and professors or teachers would write on it.
Overheads,
overhead, right?
Yeah.
That was the fancy part. And then, of course, we've had projections where whatever you have on the laptop, it just gets projected to the screen. So tell me the use cases for these smart displays or whiteboards.
The use case is really taking lesson content. So, rather than a chalkboard or a blackboard in the classroom or a foil or an overhead, as you just described, Scott, taking digital content from a PC or from the internet, bringing it up on a large display, and being able to interact with it with a touch surface at the front of the classroom. So what we do is we'll take flat content, so like a PDF file or something, and then we'll gamify it, we'll add activities to it, we'll make it more interactive and engaging. And the whole idea is that we get the attention of the students, because when students are engaged with the content, they tend to learn much better. And so it's a tool to help educators do their job.
Now, of course, there are whiteboard apps on people's laptops. So professors and teachers can also use whiteboards on their laptops and be able to annotate, draw. So how is this different from what you're talking about?
Yeah, so we do both. So we have applications that run on your PC that help you annotate over things. We call that Smart Ink. But if you want to do a front of the room type of presentation where you want to interact with the class in that kind of a use case, then you can basically interact with your computer via the smartboard. So you are doing everything you're doing on your computer or your tablet, but you're doing in front of the class. So that is a use case that is very popular, primarily in the primary grades, where the kids like to see, or the students are more focused on somebody at the front of the room than somebody behind a lecture or a lectern or a podium scribbling on their laptop. So we do both types of products and both approaches. So it really depends on the case. For large lecture halls and universities, it's more of exactly what you described. For K through 12 classrooms, it's a much more up front of the classroom or the teacher walking around in the classroom, a display at the front that can be used for interactive content, or you can use personal devices as well. So it's really creating a place where things come together.
Can you talk about the different segments? You mentioned a couple already, but I think there's also from a workplace as well. What are all the different segments? And if you could provide a breakdown of percentages.
Yeah, about 80% of our revenue comes from K through 12 worldwide. And so we sell into about 170 different countries worldwide. So we're very well known within the education sector. About 20% of our revenue comes from what we call enterprise, which is basically everything but K-12. Some of the verticals that people have heard about, UCC meeting rooms, so meeting rooms with WebEx or Microsoft Teams Meet or Zoom. Those are where we provide the interactive display at the front. Other use cases like verticals like lean manufacturing, where you're on a factory floor, huddle spaces where people want to work together, general purpose meeting rooms, anywhere where you want to work together with people and collaborate on digital content are verticals and use cases that we dig into. Because we have a pretty big software team, we're able to customize our solutions to work with the killer apps in the space. So it makes the workflows more sticky if you use our technology.
Now, there are, of course, a lot of competitors, and I think there's even large tech companies that have something similar. But again, my understanding is that when it comes to your whiteboards, it's really the ability to have that longevity, some 50,000 hours in terms of functioning. And again, that's relatively much longer than, let's say, other competitors that are doing something similar, right?
Yeah, it's proving to be much longer than that even actually. So we say 50,000 because that's the popular thing that people are selling with respect to some of the component lifetimes, but the real life of the systems is proving to be significantly longer than that. And so because of that, and because of the types of customers we have, it's really important for us to say, how do you protect your investment in the long term? Right? Because we're usually talking about public institutions. They have lumpy budgets, capital expenditures, etc. And so what we pride ourselves in doing is keeping people whole on the long term. So if you buy something from Smart in 2015, it is still operational today. And we have an upgrade path for you that is environmentally friendly, among other things, that you can reuse that major portion of your capital investment with a couple of upgrades and be as if you bought something today that's brand new. So the upgradability of our products is something that we take a lot of pride in. The backwards compatibility of everything we do new with what's old is another aspect of what we take a lot of pride in, and it reflects the kind of customer base that we have and what they value.
And those are important selling points, given the fact that K through 12, as an example, when they make budget decisions, it's not easy, and certainly they're making decisions oftentimes for capital expenditures for the next 5, 10 plus years. So that ability to have assets that last that long with little maintenance is going to be critical, right?
It's absolutely critical. And then, one of the ethos for the company is that we do want to see educational outcomes improve. And so technology is one part of that, but also working on the bigger ecosystems. And we do something called the EdTech assessment, which is saying, there's 27 things that you need to look at if you're deploying technology in classrooms. And if you don't do all 27 well, you will have mixed results. And so we look at the long-term picture. And so we're there to help. As much as we want the sales, we also want to highlight to the customers that there's other areas that they might want to look at investing in or spending time on solving to really unlock the value of their tech investment.
Now, of course, one of the big trends that we've seen in schools is really looking for assets that have very low capex and almost zero opex. And all you have to do is look at those very inexpensive laptops that students are given. So with that kind of a backdrop, how does that put price pressure on your products?
It doesn't. It doesn't. We're not in the device portion of it, so we don't do personal devices. We looked at that space. It's a very competitive space. The one thing that I think folks have ignored or forgotten about is that what is the upgradability of those devices? Can you upgrade the OS system you buy an iPad or you buy a laptop? how long is that CPU good for? And so is the CPU going to work on the next operating system that you need, or is it going to be obsolete? And I think people have kind of found themselves in a situation where they bought, a computer or a piece of tech, and then they realize that the operating system is the thing that is the weak link in the system. And so then they have to buy new stuff just to keep themselves on the network and connected. So what we've done is we've separated our compute from our device, and that way we're able to update the actual compute module and keep things alive. So I think from a price pressure perspective, people are coming around to the fact that it's not as cheap as it might seem to go down the kind of use and replace approach. In the enterprise space, people have got used to the 3-year refresh cycle on devices. That's not the case in schools. And so when schools look at the total cost of purchasing, they're looking at a much longer time horizon. So it gives us an advantage when we have a story. And it's not just about the cost today, but it's the cost of ownership over the long term.
Let's talk about the last 3+ years, especially during COVID, when schools, universities, businesses were pretty much completely online, and there was really no in-classroom or boardroom types of activities. How did you manage to survive through those years?
It was very good. The silver lining on COVID, because it generally sucked for everybody, but the silver lining for us was that COVID forced people to go into what we call a hybrid learning environment, which is something that we've been talking about and pitching with our products and solutions for quite a while. All of a sudden, our user base became very savvy and aware of what they needed to work remotely in a classroom setting. So a lot of our solutions, which are primarily hardware, but there's a lot of software, there's a lot of cloud software that goes along with our solutions as well, on how we can create content, deliver content, aggregate content. That all became very, very popular because people needed to use that type of a solution during COVID. So it proved for us to be very beneficial because the end users became aware of how they could use the technology in a remote setting. And that's translated directly back into the classroom and how to do the one-to-one device, device deployments that they've done in the schools. They've now figured out, or they've learned through COVID, how to do that properly, how to integrate personal devices into the learning sessions. And those are all things that we were pitching, 5-10 years ago, that because of COVID, that was the impetus for people to really take that step and learn how to use it. So it was a positive. It was a positive in that sense. It's always great when the users know what they need because you get really good feedback.
Yeah, it's interesting because from a behavior change, it's hard for people to adopt something new, and COVID really forced them to learn these new online capabilities or hybrid capabilities, especially for teachers that are not really tech oriented. I want to talk about one area. You mentioned that you integrate with other apps. So let's talk about Gen AI and how are you looking to integrate with Gen AI types of applications so that if things are, let's say, drawn on these whiteboards, it automatically converts into beautiful images or videos, or maybe if it's a sentence or paragraph that's written, it automatically recommends enhanced phrasing or grammatic corrections, for instance.
Yeah, so we take a very, very careful approach on using AI. Obviously, the biggest challenge we have is that we need to make sure we're always pointing to some form of truth. So there's a lot of schools that are very concerned about that. We have what we call a district library where we have content that is curated by the district themselves so that we can point an AI engine or function to that. All of the generative AI that we're doing in our products is on the edge of the network, so we don't pass information back and forth to the cloud. Any personal information doesn't go into the cloud. We've been doing things like shape recognition, text recognition for quite a while. We have tried voice. We've tried and experimented with voice recognition and voice commands and things like that. We're still looking at how we can do that without violating some privacy issues. Also, with our safe searches and things within Bing, we use Bing Safe Search. So we apply AI where we feel like we can apply it with predictive results that are safe. And so we're taking a very, very cautious approach. We do have generative AI within our lesson creation software where you can create, content using AI. in a limited sense. Again, really making sure that we're not crossing any boundaries that are inappropriate, and making sure that the content that is delivered is vetted and controlled in some way. Yeah, it's a very conservative approach to AI. It's definitely there. We're every day we're looking at ways that we can do it, but we're taking a very measured approach because it is such a sensitive topic.
But again, I completely agree, especially in the context of primary and secondary grades, and given the fact that there's a lot of kinks that I think these Gen AI large language models have to work out. But let's fast forward to maybe 10, 20 years out.
Hmm.
Because one of the things that you mentioned was ultimately it's about enhancing learning.
Yeah,
And at some point, let's say that we work through the truth issues, work through the validation, the hallucination
yeah,
issues, the copyright issues, all these things, right, that current AI systems are having. But let's fast forward to really enhance robust, trustworthy AI with
yeah,
guardrails.
yeah,
Not just AI, but robotics. So in a classroom context, where you have AI that's not just within these laptops or whiteboards, but let's say it's on the devices that the kids are wearing, like watches or maybe glasses, whatnot. And you have actually robots that are effectively even becoming facilitators or tutors. How do you foresee these agents potentially working in conjunction with teachers or facilitators or becoming the teachers themselves?
yeah. So I mean, it's a great question because that's where we all want to get to at some point in time if we can do it properly. And we have an expression with inside Smart, which is inspiring greatness, and that is unlocking the potential within every learner once they understand a concept. And so what we want to do is we want to bring the using technology. We want to bring those moments where the teacher and the student can have that moment where the student unlocks some knowledge or understands some concept, right? Because we believe that that ultimately inspires them to do great things. Uh, Having said all that stuff, if you look at, how do you motivate an individual learner, right? Are they engaged in the content? Is the content where they are? Are you meeting them? Are you challenging them on the quizzes or tests or assignments? Are you tailoring the work to where the student is weakest and not just emphasizing where they're the strongest? All of those things that are kind of personalizing and privatizing the delivery of the lesson and the experience to the student are things that we're absolutely passionate about, pursuing in a safe way, because ultimately I think that's where education will be going. It's going to be much more tailored to the individual and the individual learning style than what we're seeing today. Today we have, it's not quite the factory approach of the 1900s, but we're still trying to apply a general recipe that works for the majority of the population. And I think as we can tailor that more specifically, you'll see improvements in overall educational results. Today, we're doing it crudely here in Canada with charter schools. Where people send kids into charter schools where they can specialize, especially STEM schools where they can specialize on specific subjects and really kind of help kids enhance their skills in certain areas. If we can do that in a more general sense across the board, I think that'll be a fantastic outcome.
So my final question is a metaphor that I will bring from economics. Economics oftentimes refer to buggy whips, companies that
Oh
focus
yeah,
on making the best
buggy whips. Yeah,
buggy
yeah,
whips possible.
yeah.
And the question really is around how do you future-proof your products in the sense that while Meta's push towards metaverse has been kind of mixed, but I do believe that it could be several decades away, but it will become realities. And from an engagement, when you think about especially mixed realities, where it's coming from the glasses that the kids are wearing, or
Mhm.
more realistically, holographic capabilities that we're just starting to see from some of the Korean companies.
Yeah.
When those types of forms that are really super engaging and has not a two-dimensional but three-dimensional kind of a vector immersive experience, where does whiteboards come in?
Oh, I mean, a whiteboard. It you could ultimately say, a whiteboard. I wouldn't call it a buggy whip, but I would say that technology has its time, and as we get into that immersive meta space, maybe whiteboards aren't the thing that are going to be used all over the place. But software, I mean, Smart as a company is, just as much about the software and the content as we are about the hardware, right? We're known for the hardware. So we will be making that transition as that happens. But we're not trying to push buggy whips in an age of electric cars. That metaphor is what our previous CEO used to say as well. We're not selling buggy whips to people. So it's a good analogy, but we'll kind of evolve with the space. Front of room displays is still a growing category, and we'll participate in that actively, having created that category. But we're always looking at other adjacencies to get into, and software is a big part of our play. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if you get into a completely virtual meta space, what are the tools you need? How are the interactions with the real world going to work? What does the technology look like? Those are all things that we need to address and answer real time.
Well, again, from my perspective, whether it's 2D or 3D or holographic, the need to annotate, to emphasize what you're looking at from a visual aspect is still going to be needed. So from a software point of view, I do think that in front of the classroom to more of individual in front of kind of type of capability will continue to exist. So with that, I have been joined by Nicholas Svensson, CEO of Smart Technologies. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.